Greetings, Greg here from 01453. I'm sitting on the front porch. It's about 11 o'clock at night. And I'm going to tell you a story about Haute. This is a story that I used to tell my daughter many years ago. What Haute is, and what it was, and what it still is an island in the Bay of Fundy. A very hard to get to island in the middle of the Bay of Fundy. You could Google it, look it up, and see what it is and what it was. And it's a place that I hope to get to someday. My interest was really made active in it when a dear friend of mine went there. And I'm still interested in going. Although I haven't been there yet, I feel like I'm getting closer as each year goes by. And God willing, someday I'll be there. So I would make up these stories for my youngest daughter and tell them to her at night. Partially based on what could have been. There really was a lighthouse keeper and his wife, and they tended the light on Haute, and they had a farm, and they raised farm animals, and they didn't have much communication, and there certainly was no Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi or anything back then. But anyhow, I would make up these stories. And basically the characters in these stories were the lighthouse keeper. Now, I always called him the lighthouse keeper. I never gave him a name. But he tended the light. And he and his wife lived in the lighthouse. And I said that they had 2 kids at home, 2 daughters. At the time, I had 2 daughters at home, and both our sons are grown and gone to college. But anyhow, these 2 daughters, one of them was off in college, I think. But this was really all about the youngest little girl at home. Now, I called the lighthouse keeper the lighthouse keeper. I never gave him a name. And I called this little girl the little girl. I never gave her a name either. And how things went was the lighthouse keeper tended the light. And he was all about that. It was very important to him. Of course, he had farm animals for food, and he had a small working farm there. But every day, every night, he would tend the light. Now, the little girl was in school. Now, she initially was homeschooled by her mother, but also she went to school on the school boat. Now, the school boat is, well, they didn't have school buses. How was she going to get to school but a boat, right? They lived on an island, so that's how she went to school. And, every day, the little girl would, do her best. And if she, had a great week, her father would reward her. And on Friday night, after her chores and homework were done, he used to take her up in the lighthouse. And she would help him, and she would clean the light. And her father, the lighthouse keeper, would talk with her about what was important. And they would clean the light, and the little girl could then light the light. And, as it was getting dark, she would learn about the different boats and the ships going by, and her father would point them out to her. And after the lighthouse was lit, the little girl would go down into the main house and make cookies with her mother. Now, these may have been chocolate chip cookies, or my personal favorite, molasses cookies. And while they were making cookies, her father would go outside the light up top, and play his bagpipes. And so he'd be playing the bagpipes while the little girl was making cookies with her mom. Now, the little girl had 3 Scottish Terriers, because the lighthouse keeper, just like me, had a Scottish background. And these little puppies had names, and the little girl gave them 3 names for 3 puppies. One was Haggis, one was Molasses, and one was Barley, because my youngest daughter really likes Scotch barley soup. So Haggis, Barley, and Molasses were the names. And these puppies were, puppies, and they would get into stuff. The lighthouse keeper also, he actually made his daughter, the little girl, a sort of a butterfly sanctuary that would help keep the butterflies safe, and where they would come and live. It wasn't a cage, but it was sort of an aviary or something. I forget exactly how it went. But she would go in there and color at a table that her father made for her. And she and her father painted the table different colors, really nice summery type colors, and a variety of colors. And the little girl would go in there. Now, the little girl had a friend, and her friend would come over most summers. And her friend's name was Anne of Green Gables. And guess where she was from? That's right. And so Anne of Green Gables would take the train from PEI down to the shores of Nova Scotia, and she would have to come over on a boat. Now, the boat was operated by this other character, Captain John Martin. And Captain John Martin was a lobster fisherman, and he had a green and white boat. And he had a wife, like he does in real life, and he had 2 kids, like he does in real life. And Captain John Martin would be usually sailing by Haute every time the light was lit, especially when the little girl was out there, and she would wave to him, and Captain John Martin would toot his horn back at her. Now, one of the stories had to do with one winter. There was a very bad storm, and Captain John Martin was taking his family to church or something, or shopping or whatever, and they got caught in this horrible storm, and they decided to put in at Haute to be safe. However, the weather was getting very rough. The mighty ship was tossed. You know, the minnow could be lost, and actually the boat almost was lost, and their ship was being dashed amongst the rocks. And so the lighthouse keeper and his daughter, the little girl, had to go down and rescue them. And Captain John Martin and his family were rescued, and they survived. However, the little boat had a lot of damage, and they had to spend the winter there. This was about 100 years ago. And so while they spent the winter there with lots and lots of snow, the lighthouse keeper and the captain, Captain Martin, worked on the boat to repair it. But it was a great time, and even though they had school and chores and etc., they had a great time together. Now, once again, back then there was no Wi-Fi, there was no Wi-Fi, there was no internet, there was no cell phones, no radio. They had music, and they had fun with each other, playing together. I introduced the idea of a little lake on top of Haute that they could go swimming in the summertime. And the little girl's friend, Anne of Green Gables, would come over for the summer, and they would have a lot of fun together. Anyhow, those are the major themes. I see that I'm getting close to 10 minutes, so I probably should end this. But I wanted to get those thoughts down for you. Take care. Keep your stick on the ice. I'd be interested in if you've ever made up any stories for your kids. We're all in this together. Be nice, and remember, Santa's watching.